I'm so excited for today's podcast interview. It's with Melisha, Mel Jackman. And I want to give a quick bio about Mel before we go. Mel believes in equity, academic excellence, and inquiry for all students and families. She's currently the executive director of Brooklyn Kindergarten Society, and she's leading the charge to make sure that Brooklyn's youngest learners have a robust educational experience grounded in STEAM, which is science, tech, engineering, art, and math. Under Mel, BKS, Brooklyn Kindergarten Society, it'll open up its first sensory gym within New York housing developments to allow all students access to occupational, physical, and speech therapies. And before BKS, Mel was the managing director of Out of School Time and College Scholars Program at East Harlem Tutorial Program. And she's also principal within New York City Public Schools. She's got a BS in chemistry from City College and a master's in arts in chemistry education from City College. She currently lives in Brooklyn with her 2 teenage daughters. Welcome, Mel.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
All right, Mel, I have to start with the story of being out in the water, and you are on vacation, and it is truly a life or death situation. So can you just give us a summary of it?
While on vacation in Curacao, I decided to take a risk that I did not think about the unintended consequence. I went snorkeling for the very first time, and I did not have a life jacket on. And I was captivated by the fish that I was seeing and the whole experience. And I ended up swimming out way on the yonder, right by where the boats start to dock, in like the middle of the ocean. And water got into my snorkel gear, and I had to take off my gear so that I could breathe properly. And I had to tread water. I think the part that is so interesting is that I went to Brooklyn Technical High School, and swimming was a graduation requirement. And I could never pass my swim test because I couldn't tread water for more than 3 minutes. And I was in the middle of the ocean. I couldn't see the sand. I didn't know which way to turn, but I had to tread water. And I treaded water, I think, for about 20 minutes, screaming for help. And then I stopped screaming, and I realized that I had to think really carefully, because one or two things were going to happen. I was going to drown and die, or by some miracle, I was going to figure out my direction and get back to shore. And it all happened really slow, and I realized like I might actually die in this moment. And I was like, nope, not happening. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm not dying. I'm going to tread this water. But lo and behold, I had the orange 2-piece kente cloth swimsuit on. So I was sticking out in the water, and someone saw me on a catamaran and jumped into the water. And I don't know how long we were in the water. He told me to be calm. I was like, I'm calm. I was so calm. And he towed me back to, I want to say, the shore, if I can get my thoughts together. And the interesting thing about the person who saved me, he was a fire chief from Toronto. So the right person who was used to saving lives saved my life. I don't know why we were in the same place. I don't know why he saw me. And that experience changed my entire life and my well-being. This happened in 2019, and I'm forever changed by it.
What changed, Mel? Who are you now that you weren't before?
I've always been one to believe mind over matter. I think it's really easy to intellectualize that and tell yourself, don't quit, never give up. But in that moment, it kicked in. Don't quit, don't give up, and to be very intentional moving forward about how delicate life is. I've been able to be extremely grateful for every single moment. Like I have a ritual now of like prayer and gratitude in a way that I've had before, but not consistent. And I probably did it because I knew that was a best practice to do, to think about self-care. the self-care now, I'm feeling it all over my body. Like I'm so grateful to have another day. So much of that has just stuck with me about my intentionality, how precious life is, and also like what takes up space in my mind and how I respond under times of extreme pressure, and the need to problem solve through every and anything. So these are just things that have come up in a way that transcends what I've read in a book or any experience. Like, it's a lived experience for me.
It's interesting how you now embody these best practices, things like the rituals, the gratitude, the self-care, the planning of both to and through, but also knowing that you only have this moment. Those are things, you would read an article, but then to say, no, I know, my body knows, and therefore I will.
I actually read articles coming back from vacation about a couple of people who went on vacation and drowned. Like this happens. This happens. Almost like, what made my experience different? Because for all intents and purposes, who comes back from that? I'm not a strong swimmer. I couldn't tread water. And the right person saved me, who knew how to swim and tow me at the same time. I get chills thinking about it.
I mean, what are the chances? I believe in different people believe things, but I believe that there was perhaps a spirit, bigger spirit guiding.
I'll take it.
There's more work to be done for you, Mel, more life to be enjoyed.
I move with so much, like, I need impact, purpose, like legacy. Like, there's a new momentum and pep in my step of like, I'm on this earth for a reason.
With that, I'd love to take it back to young Mel and kind of give us an overview of how you got from young Mel to your position today.
So I'm a first generation college graduate, high school graduate. My parents had an 8th grade education, and they came to this country from Grenada and Barbados with very simple ambitions of to have a job and have a home and raise a family. And my family always told me to just go to school and learn. They had no real specific expectations other than go to school and learn. I had a great opportunity to go to New York City public schools and go through their gifted and talented schools from kindergarten. And I went to a specialized high school, having great teachers, people who poured into me. I was challenged with a ton of experiences, and I had lots of perspective. And I wanted to be a scientist, and that's what I thought I was going to do. And I went to college and majored in chemistry. And somewhere along the line, something shifted for me. And I realized that the pathway that I had was very unique and not fully accessible to all. And I got really inspired about teaching and learning, and how do you create pathways so that all children get the best teachers, have the best experiences, learn to problem solve, learn to be creative, and embrace their creativity that's naturally given to them. I did move on to be a science teacher, and creativity and problem solving and making meaning of the world has been like the foundation, with a sense of equity. Really not limiting a child's experiences because of socioeconomic status or race or where you go to school, but more so it's a given right. Everyone has this innate genius that needs to be explored and tapped into. I became a principal, and the principalship transformed me. I got to be a grown up, make tough decisions. I thought I was grown before. No, the principalship grew me up for sure. I got hardened in the sense that my skin got thicker, and I learned to take criticism and not fall apart. And that was a journey for years, and dealt with people pleasing and how do I make decisions that sometimes everyone doesn't agree with, but what do I value? And when I went with the mindset of putting children first, everything became simpler. Putting children first. Does this decision impact children, and how so? And I've moved in that way ever since. And I wanted to expand my leadership. I had great opportunity when I decided to resign from the principalship to make a transition into nonprofit leadership. And I worked at East Harlem Tutorial Program and had a chance to learn the workings of an organization. I've been in school my entire life and career, and learning the finances and revenue and marketing and communications and talent and HR. I was like, oh, I love it. And it was a place for me to stretch. and grow. And I did so much learning in the 2 years I was there that I got propelled into the executive director position here at BKS. And I get to combine leadership and org management, but still my love for children and equity and learning in one space. And the great thing about BKS is that our 7 preschools or educational centers are located in public housing or NYCHA housing. A place where so many people are afraid to tap in, or maybe you've only seen images on TV. And we are at the heart of systemic poverty, marginalized communities. And what we're doing here is, I like to say, we are creating a private school experience for all.
Love how it comes full circle, Mel, in your desire for great schools for your family, even your daughters, and all kids, especially at the youngest ages, because the equity gap already begins. So I'm excited about your work, especially when it's like right where people live in the housing developments. It's beautiful. Mm-hmm. So I want to talk about this idea of myths, because there's these rules about what it means to be successful. And you mentioned some earlier that it used to be a people pleasing and you had to have the harder skin as you got to be more of a senior leader. So could you talk about these myths for you?
One big myth is that I have to have this superwoman cape on all the time, and I must fix every problem, know every solution, and never make a mistake. The amount of pressure that puts on you is unfair. Leaders don't know it all. Leaders learn by doing, just like everyone else. And once I realized a superwoman cape was not needed or ever needed to be a leader, the work started to become what it always was, enjoyable. And not feeling so, the pressure that I put on myself to get it right and to do it all started to ease up. I still go back and forth with it, but I now know in my heart, in my body, and my soul, like I don't have to wear a cape. I'm not supposed to know all the things, and I will make mistakes. Perfectionism is not the end goal, and that trying my best, not making assumptions, being super impeccable with my word are really some things that that's what I should value instead versus my cape.
How did you learn that, Mel? Because I find that often, especially women leaders or people of color, there is not a ton of room for mistakes. So how did you get that empowering message for yourself?
You're right about that. Sometimes it's hard to make mistakes as a woman of color from the expectations of others that they put on you or the ones that you put on yourself. I think my circle is full of other principals or leaders, and hearing shared experiences helps. Having a community of people who are vulnerable and share their trials, tribulations, the good, their thoughts, helps to normalize, oh, there are other people who have similar walks of life or even different, who are having these emotions, and these emotions are not unique. It's a shared experience. Like, oh, I can give myself ease. I can forgive myself for mistakes because look, we're all in this together. So having community has been helpful. I love the book, The 4 Agreements. I read that once a year. And it's about like an indigenous way of life. And like, this is the essential foundations of what it means to be a good, productive member of society while keeping it all very simple.
It's been a while since I've read the book. I was wondering if you could give a quick summary on the 4 agreements, or this what they are.
Yeah, well, I named 3 of them that I do live by. So the 4 agreements: not making assumptions, basically asking the questions, communicating, and not making up stories in your head about things you're unaware of. Like say the thing and have the conversation in all walks of your life. The second one, and I may not be going in order, to be impeccable of your word. Integrity is one of my own personal core values. So that one like resonates so much, but also never to speak ill of yourself. Don't use your tongue to put yourself down and others, staying away from gossip and venting. These take you into a negative space. It's like a great reminder when you want to go down, like I like to say, the dark side, to come back to the light. Never taking things personal. So that's that thick skin component of, okay, something was said or done, and understanding that people all have their own experiences and they see the world through their own paradigms. And even things that are directed to you, it comes with the tinge of that person's lived experience. And you have to understand that, not to internalize it. And it's a reminder. So when people are being critical or giving you feedback or not agreeing, take it in to understand, oh, this is a perspective. And I could learn from it, but never to penetrate the heart and become part of your essence. And that's happening if you're looping things. That's been my kind of like indicator, like, oh, I've internalized this because I'm thinking about it all the time. Mm. And lastly, like I tell my students all the time, always try your best. Even if things don't work out the way you want it to work out, when you put your heart, your soul, your energy into your work, you can walk away knowing you've done well. It's like your own self-love and validation, because you've tried your best. You've done your best. And despite the outcome, you can be at peace or ease until the next thing comes. So the 4 agreements encompasses those values, and I truly try to live by them. But I've been thinking about these agreements for years. But after that accident, or that incident rather, they've become so much more ingrained. And I'm just thinking about them constantly as I try to seize the day and live my life as impactful as possible until I close my eyes. Like, I am laser focused on that.
Of those 4 agreements, Mel, was there one that was such a wowzer with what you had originally thought that's made such a big difference?
I would say the one that was the most challenging for me was the wowzer, and it continues to be my work, and it's the making assumptions, going up the ladder of inference. Sometimes not wanting to have that tough conversation or even communicating what I need. Assumptions come in the mix of like my why. So my why is not clear about why I want to do something. I've probably gone up and gone up the ladder of inference, made an assumption of, and projected or predicted the future of how it's going to turn out. So that's one that I constantly try to catch. And that has been the most difficult. And at the same time, like the wowzer one, like I see my work with that agreement the most.
Could you share, Mel, an example of how remembering the agreement pulled you out so that you could not go up that ladder of inference?
My first year at Brooklyn Kindergarten Society, I had a banner year, and I was still very worried about how everybody perceived me or thought about my work. And it was time for my end of year review, and it was going very, very, very well. And in the middle of the review, I named that I shared some of my areas where I felt that I could do more work in, or ways that I can do better. And I was very hesitant to share that. Like, I didn't want to share a weakness. I almost didn't say the thing because I was afraid of how it would be perceived. They wouldn't see me as a strong leader or someone who's ticking off all the successes. And when I stopped making that assumption, I said it, and it became this wonderful discourse and dialogue. And what I got out of it was more support of like, oh, we can actually help you with this. You don't have to be the bearer of this burden. I was like, yeah, I could do it. So part of not making assumptions for me comes with also being vulnerable to say what's on my mind so that I can get either the support I need, the listening ear I need, or maybe some resources that I didn't think of.
Vulnerability, it's the antithesis to the Wonder Woman I've got to do it all. And actually, that's like a way to connect. So I love that you mentioned that. Was there a time in your career when you learned what it would really take to get to the top?
I think it was when I was becoming a principal. And I had received my principal certification maybe 3 years before I actually became a principal. Because even though I went through the training and I had all the extra degree and so forth, I wasn't ready. And I realized because my emotional fortitude still needed more development. Technically, I could do the job. Technically, I knew what had to happen on the ground with operations, and I had a strong instructional vision. But until I tapped into my confidence and felt secure and had the right mindset, it wasn't going to happen. And it took me years after getting the certification to then, like, I'm ready. And that was an internal conversation, experience, self-esteem journey that I had to go through to know that I could do it. So for me, it was very much emotional, very much about what I could bring to get to the next level. Like, I had to believe in me first before everyone else believed in me. But until I did, I wasn't making the movement to get to the next step. And that was pivotal in me taking on anything in regards of a leadership role.
So, Mel, if I were to come to you to say, how can I build my confidence? Other people seem to be confident in me, but I'm not confident in myself. What would you tell me to do?
One, I started asking myself some really hard questions. My journal, and I keep it next to me, and this is this month's journal, Find Joy in the Ordinary. And I started asking myself questions as if I was out of body. What does Mel bring to the table? What are some areas that I want to get better at? What do I need to work on? But I would ask myself constant. I had about 50 or so little micro questions that I would work myself over months. And I would do the same questions month after month, and the answers would start changing. And I had to go through a real deep reflection process and not keep it surface to get to the core of what I was afraid of. And what I was afraid of, and I can say it now, was rejection. And my rejection stemmed from some stuff that happened in my childhood of like wanting to be perfect and not wanting to get that negative, response because I didn't have I didn't do the thing the way someone else wanted me to do. So I got to the core of my fear, which was rejection, and I started working through that. And what would be the feeling that I would have if I got rejected? And sit in that. And when I did get rejected, realizing like, oh, I didn't die, I didn't fall apart. Like, it was a feeling, it was an emotion, and it worked itself out. And then I started really digging deep of like, how long did these feelings of despair last when they came? For me, it was 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, I realized I started to feel better. So I started to normalize rejection and or failure. And I was like, oh, I can do this. Now, granted, I didn't go into the principalship superwoman. I had my cape on. I went through that process, but I knew I could do it. I knew I could do it. I knew what was the root of my fear, rejection. And I've been working through that continuously. Like, the work doesn't stop. It just shows up in different ways because the parameters have shifted or the paradigm has shifted. But knowing the thing at the core that's stopping you from making the jump, very, very important to do that self-work and to continue to nurture it, because that's that inner child stuff. And we all get that childhood amnesia, or maybe you remember it, or maybe it's packed away in that subconscious, but you got to address it because that subconscious will have you doing things you're not even aware of. And the goal is to become more self-aware and to catch it when it's happening.
That's deep. The healing, that inner child work is so important, yet I don't think that we really talk about it in schools. even with the leaning towards social emotional. So I'm so glad you're bringing it up, and that it's important work with a therapist or on your own But I love that you're doing that, and it's been profound for you. That rejection, you're still alive. It felt like you would die, you didn't, and that it's normal. Right. I often find that when we're going through painful emotions, the first thing for me is to stay really busy or to push it away or have the childhood amnesia. And it takes a lot of courage to actually look at it and see it. And however long it takes to process, 2 weeks or however much time.
From my own experience, is that when I think about whatever the moment was from my childhood that triggers an emotional response, when I stop having that emotional response, tearing up, or that painful feeling in the body because it was so heavy or it hurt, I'm like, oh, I'm moving towards acceptance. I'm making progress. I no longer have that emotional response from that thing that happened when I was 9. I can think about it. I can speak about it. I'm making progress. That has been like the indicator of like, I'm moving through that challenge or that experience that led to me not wanting to be rejected.
And that the naming, it starts there. To first name it and then sit with it. So I'm curious about your goals. Did you have your sights on, I want to be a CEO, I want to be an executive director?
Initially, when I went on to the nonprofit world, I wanted to learn, I wanted to stretch, I wanted to like see the transferable skills, how it would land. And by chance, the more I got involved and the more I started making more connections, and I got some good feedback from my former ED, and I took it in. I was like, oh, I want to stretch in this way. He told me, you need to grow your social capital. You need to stop playing small. You need to lean in and share and talk to people about the awesome things that you're doing. You need to build your network. I said, oh, what? He said, so how did you get here again? I said, hard work. No one gave me the ins to anywhere I went. I literally showed up blank, without a referral, without a reference, without anything in every single career that I've gone. I don't even have a LinkedIn. But what I have been able to do is genuinely connect with people I interact with. And resume and experience has been how I've gotten to where I've gotten. But he said, if you do that, plus be who you are, to go to the next level. So I literally took his advice, started speaking up more, started to network, interface with other folks in the field, took a training, of course, you have to learn, and poof, it all happened. BKS came to fruition just like that. I was like, oh, that's what I was missing. So now I'm a networking, socializing butterfly. And that has definitely propelled so much of the work and gotten so many people more inspired. And we've done great things, diversifying revenue. And it's been amazing in these last 18 months at BKS. And I take that advice, that feedback all the time, and I move with it. The smallest thing goes a long, long way, but also authentically connecting with people, not because I want something, because I am genuinely invested in learning about the person and building a relationship has been transformative.
Mel, can you talk about the specific steps for networking? So first then BKS opportunity came. That was so quick. So it's helpful for people who have not spread their butterfly wings to have a little bit of a playbook.
First step is the awareness of how you feel about networking and socializing and naming, like just getting to the root. Do you like to do it? If you don't like to do it, if you do not like to do it, then there's some work that you got to do first. You have to practice. You need to practice your elevator intro. And if you're going to an event solo, How are you going to maneuver? Are you going to just be in the corner looking at folks, or how are you going to jump in? So I would also say, if you're going to an event, you're going to socialize or network, understand the event, understand who's potentially going to be there, and see how you may be able to engage in the conversations with folks, because you may have similar interests, be in a similar industry. And if the person is public, or the people there are more public, do your research, because you want to have a natural, organic way to start a conversation. I would also say too, why do you want to meet the people that you're meeting? You have to have your why really clear. It can't just be, I'm going to network and pass out my business card. No one's following up with you. You'll pass it out, but you won't get what you want. So your why needs to be very clear. Why do you want to know folks in this circle? And what do you have to offer them? How would you add value to them, and vice versa? Everybody wants to know how the relationship's going to work. It has to be two-sided. You can't have a one-sided relationship. So your added value has to be very clear in your mind, and you exude that. And it has to be real. Third, you got to follow up. Anyone you chat to, interact with, you have to give them that follow-up email, try to get a connection afterwards, but also, what are you going to talk about? And being very clear. Are you pitching something? Are you genuinely invested in their organization? Are you looking for a job? And what about you are you packaging very nice, that's authentic? Are you connecting about the cause about the event that you're at? All of this comes into play. And at the very end of the day, you got to be confident. You got to check that. Got to tap into your self-esteem. I think that is the biggest thing. If you are nervous about networking, you got to dig deep. What is that about? And I'm like, oh, rejection again for me. And know that piece, it goes right back. And now I network and I socialize and I build relationships with folks. But I'm genuinely interested in knowing about the person and or how that person or organization will impact BKS. It's a twofer for me. It never shifts. It's never one-sided. I have to be interested. I have to. For it to work, for those connections to be the way they have been.
I think your description of how to network is both goal-oriented, but also sourced from within, your belief about yourself and staying authentic. And also, why are you even doing it? So I love that, because it's not like, okay, get out there, get names, go home. But it's like, be yourself and have some fun and then get some work done. So I love it all. Mm-hmm. So let's go to being CEO, Mel. Is there anything surprising or maybe hard, the adversity you faced? Just I'm curious about that.
Yeah, I think in this particular time, because of the pandemic, what has been difficult and uncharted waters for me has been the constant change and communicating constant change. I'm used to communicating a plan, a process, and I've had to communicate multiple plans, multiple processes, and create buy-in nonstop and deal with people's anxieties and fears in a way that probably was never part of the equation in past. Or if it was very muted, or there was not space to mention how I feel. So now I realize the biggest challenge is communication, a clear vision in the middle of change, and keeping people inspired and not burnt out and morale high. And morale is always a thing with an organization. March is particularly hard in a school organization. But it's a challenge, but one thing I do appreciate out of it is that we get to focus more on how people feel and emotions and perspective and voice and being seen. You have to make space for that. And there's an intermingling of personal and professional constantly, and the professional environment has to include personal perspectives. So if that is challenging, but it's a necessary piece to have a good ecosystem that respects folks, because if the folks who are doing the work are not respected, how are you going to transfer the respect to children and families? Like, that's weird. It needs to all be in alignment. So
the alignment piece is so important because we're no longer being seen as just task rabbits, but actually people, humans who have values and feelings. So I think it's a good move to bring in the whole human. What advice would you give a woman in their career trying to make it to the top?
I would say, know why you want to get to the position that you want to get to. I would also say, if this move is on the trajectory of your purpose, like figure out what your purpose is, or have a sense of why you came to this world, like, or ask yourself that question before you start going through the motions or the minutia of like getting to the top. I would also say, which might be controversial, but I'm gonna say it, don't make decisions based only on income and finances. That's a tricky one. Tricky. Money does not make life, I personally feel, any better. Your happiness is always within you first. Money helps, it is nice, but making a decision strictly on income or salary, no. Have your why and your purpose established first. And then of course, factor in income. If you can get to a place where you are confident in yourself and have done some personal development, it's a good time to jump in, because so much of the work is so emotional. It's heavy. There's a lot of responsibility, and you want to come in there as whole as possible so that you can show up for your org, your team, your family. You don't want to go in that work and get burnt out and fall apart or go through a nervous breakdown, because it can happen. It's heavy. Work on self. Get this nice and right and tight. Tap into your happiness and joy, because you're going to need it when those tough days come. And if you have a support circle, really important, too, more therapists as you jump into senior leadership.
Therapist, I hear on that one. All right, let's lighten it up a bit, Mel. You ready for lightning round questions?
Absolutely.
All right, chocolate or vanilla?
Vanilla.
Cooking or takeout?
Uber, please.
Climb a mountain or jump from a plane?
The thought of both of those. Lay on the beach.
Have you ever worn socks with sandals?
Unfortunately, I have a picture when I was 5 years old. Yes.
How would you rate your karaoke skills on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being Mariah Carey?
-5.
What's a recent book you read?
Courageous Conversations.
What's your favorite way to practice self-care?
I love a good self-care. Sunday night baths, candles, rose petals, Epsom salt, Jill Scott in the background.
You've done Boss Mamas. So how was the Boss Mamas program for you? How did it help you?
Community, huge. A space to be vulnerable and pose questions and have people kind of suss through them, who also know the heaviness of balancing career, family, and self. That was really nice. And also seeing folks in different walks of life, helpful. It just gives you like, oh, my feelings, yes, they are unique, but not really. There's other folks going through the thing. And if we talk about the thing, we can actually get some more clarity. I had a couple of questions that I posed to the Boss Mamas group. They helped me out, particularly around making some assumptions. So that was helpful, to have that space. Sometimes in leadership, you don't get to interact or make new friends. So you don't make new friends all the time. So it's a way to make some new friends. Even maybe even adulting, making new friends are hard. So that was a nice space to make some new friends. I hope we stay connected and figure out how to have an in-person reunion, but everyone's so busy. But I did appreciate that And I did love the diversity of the group. There was women from all walks of life, race, different leadership position, different levels of like where they were with their families. I needed that because I've been isolated for quite a bit.
What's your definition, Mel, of a boss mama?
Badass. A boss mama stands up for herself. She knows where she's going. She's working on who she is. She doesn't have everything figured out, and she's okay with that. A boss mama is beautiful. She's fearless. She makes tough decisions. A boss mama puts her kids first. And a boss mama understands, like sometimes the kids start to itch and it's okay. A boss mama cares about people and is very intentional.
And then where can we find you?
Find me on BKS's Instagram.
Okay.
If you go to Instagram and type in Brooklyn Kindergarten Society, you can find me there. You can find me on BKS's Facebook. And I'm a Google search away.
All right, last question. Do you have a final ask, recommendation, or any parting thoughts for the audience?
If you have a dream that you want to pursue, it is yours to have. Got to believe it, get some action behind it, and stay consistent.
Love it. Thank you so much, Mel.
Thank you, Analiza.